person that's involved in capers, the state funds that on your behalf. Other entities like the city, for example, the city has to pick that cost up. So here at the school district, the state pays that.
It's determined by the state. The
Yes.
percentage is determined. And we're basically
Yes.
sent the money one day, and the same day we have to transfer it to capers.
So there's a
Correct.
state funding increase for capers
It actually has,
in
and
2018.
if you
I'm
want
trying to see the color on your
advance
bar.
us a couple graphs here, you'll see here, that's the one. Okay. You'll see here in the state sources, we are up this year. There's actually some increase in there for special ed. Maybe 100,000 of the increase is special ed money that flowed through from the state, but the rest of it is pretty much attributable to the capers increase that the state is matching.
The state gives that to us, so it comes in as revenue, and then the very next day it goes out as an expense. That's why our expenses have gone up as well.
Is it on a matching basis? They match,
It's a
it's
set
just a set
percentage.
percentage of their salary?
Right.
Mhm.
And do you know what percentage of their salary it is?
I only know the person, so depending on which capers tier they are, or everybody at 6 now, like everybody might be at 6 now. Every district employee that qualifies under capers has to contribute 6% to capers, and then capers comes and matches, I don't know what their formula matches though.
It's between 11 and 12%.
Cumulatively, 6% from the employee, 5% from the state.
It's 11% for the state.
11%. When they upped the capers contribution, that was all on the state side, did they require employees to contribute more?
A few years ago, they did increase for employees as well, yes.
How much?
2%, yeah.
4 to 6.
Mhm.
And that was in 14 or 15.
Yes.
If they opt out of the capers, then they don't get a match, or they're not allowed to opt out.
You can't opt out. If you meet certain criteria, you have to contribute to capers.
But it's one of those shell games. This makes the state look like they're funding us more, but it goes out the next day to go back into the capers fund.
Sure.
Yes. And there is actually some detail on what that capers match and information is on page 12 and 13 of the notes to the financial, if you're wanting to delve into that later. You want to back up one graph for us? Yeah. So now if you'll go to. So can you go to? Yes. Looking at the receipts then, the fund all those other expenditures in addition to the capers, you see the state sources there at 68% this year. That's up a couple points. The federal source from the various federal grants that the district receives, it's at 9% this year, which is actually down a couple points. The remaining areas, the healthcare premiums that are collected from employees, miscellaneous fees, your interest, and then your tax dollars, percentage-wise, those are all the same. And I guess what this, and this, again, we excluded the transfers, but it's across all funds. So what it really portrays, other than the fact the state and federal sources are such a large portion, but for every dollar that is needed for the district to fund its education here for our students, only 11 cents of it is coming from our local tax dollars. So then going on to the next graph that we were on a minute ago, there you'll see the dollars involved. Those tax dollars are here lower end of the pie, or the spectrum anyway, and you'll see that it appears that they actually went down in fiscal year 15 and have been steady since then. some of that's a little bit misleading because the state has taken that 20 mills we were looking at the first graph, and instead of calling that local tax dollars now, they call that state aid coming back to you. So that's why you see the big jump that occurred here in that same time period. And then, like we said, the additional increase in the state aid this year is due to a combination of the capers and some special ed money that was flowed through. Another thing.
Is it safe to say that if you continue the trends as they used to be calculated, you could sort of project the trend on the local taxes in a similar way as before they made that adjustment?
I'd hate to say that, Mark, because of the drop that the district experienced a few years ago in the oil and gas valuation would have had an impact on that. But it has started to come back, so the trend is probably back upwards now. You'll see there was a dip in the state aid here in 2010 and 2011. That's offset by the increases experienced in the federal aid that year. That was some of the smoke and mirrors, I call it, that was going on, in that they were using federal era money at that time to fund some of the basic grant requirements that they were passing through. Otherwise, the federal aid is pretty well evened off, or in some cases it's actually going down a little bit. The big spike we have there, of course, is when the bond proceeds came in to fund the new construction district. One thing I might point out here, the health insurance premiums, that trend has been higher, that you're seeing that revenue go up, but the last couple of years, the district has absorbed a lot of those costs themselves, and so that's held steady and gone down just a little bit. So then looking at the snapshot of all the district funds, this is actually in the bound financial statements, and it's statement 1 on page 4. But of all the district's funds, unencumbered cash ended at fiscal year 18 at just over 27 million, compared to 22 million the year before. So up just short of 5 million for the year. One of the larger increases as far as your direct operating funds was in the supplemental general, where we were at 477,000. However, some of the other funds that had significant increases, the capital outlay fund was up 3.1 million, putting it with a balance of 6.8 million at June 30th of 18. Sounds like a large number, but you've got a long-range plan for buildings that you're looking at, maintenance and everything. That's about over 24 million and expenditure needs on it. When you consider that you're dealing with over 20 buildings, 6.8 million is not very significant. Professional development was up 652,000. Again, that was at a board directive that administration followed. There was a $1 million increase in the contingency reserve, giving it a balance of 3.7 million. Again, sounds like a large number, but that's only about 2% of your operating expenses for a year. So not really a very significant amount. And then the textbook rental fund, not rental, textbook rental, was up $1 million, but that was as you were planning for new curriculum to come on board. Few decreases. The most significant was in your at-risk funds. It was down about 436,000. And then the other one that was a big decrease comparatively is your healthcare reserve. Fiscal year 18, we were down 576,000. That's after being down the prior year about 321,000. And as I kind of indicated earlier, it's due largely to the fact that the district's been absorbing those increases in healthcare costs and has not been passing them on. We have a balance in that fund of about 3.8 million at the end of fiscal year 18, but that would only be the equivalent of 31% of your stop loss exposure. So. Some other numbers that you don't maybe see in your monthly accounting from KJ's office, the debt outstanding in the district at June 30th. There were 4 issues outstanding between your general obligation and your Build American bonds. Total just over a balance due of $93 million. You did pay down $1.8 million this past year. Scheduled final payment on those bonds is going to be fiscal year 2035. Sounds like it's a long ways off, but I think it'll be here pretty quick. And the employee compensated absences of 872,000, that's the vacation and discretionary leave that would be recognized if all the employees left at year end.
Which isn't gonna happen.
We certainly hope not. Okay. We always like to do some of the comparison to the other districts to put some of that information in perspective. This first one, the districts we're comparing to, we've selected the 15 districts that have an FTE of between 5,000 and 15,000 as being the most comparable size-wise maybe. The bars show the mill levies for each of those districts. And the red line then is the unweighted FTE. Geary County Schools, it is the lowest mill levy at 43.5 mils. But 457's in there as the second lowest of this group of 15 at the 48.8 mils.
But it's kind of difficult to compare us to Geary County, because don't they get some extra money that we
That's
don't
true.
get?
They have the Fort Riley, and they get a lot of federal money for the military base, so. Probably a good one to compare to is Topeka, and we actually switch back and forth in rank with them, it seems like, from year to year. Their mill levy is about 50.7 mils. Their FTE is quite a bit higher than ours. Dodge City, we always like to compare to the neighbors here. Their mill levy is 57.24 mils for fiscal year 18. And you can see their, if I get the right one, their FTE is quite a bit lower than here in Garden. The high point, the highest one is Andover this year. They're at 67.6 mils, and coming in fairly close to being the lowest FTE, actually. So, comparing the breakdown in those mill levies then, of course, everybody has the 20 mils for the general fund, that's pretty constant. The red bar is bond and interest, so you can see where more building activity has gone on. Comparing to our neighbors though, Dodge City here, I know some of its bond and interest costs are being covered out of its capital outlay fund. The LOB is the green, and everybody's fairly constant there. And then the blue is the bond and interest, or excuse me, the capital outlay for most everybody. That capital outlay now, for most districts, is in at 8 mils. You can see Geary County is only in at 2.3 mils for its capital outlay.
If I can, and this may be something too that kind of goes along with what we hear later on too. I overheard that the SOTA superintendent at the KASB conference complaining that their schools are getting too old, so they're gonna need to start building some more. I think one of their oldest is like 16 years old. So, yeah. So we may be seeing a difference there, whereas we're being, I think, pretty fiscally conservative with our long-range facility plan and hopefully not needing to increase our red and our blue too much, but.
Makes me wonder what kind of maintenance budget they have.
That's what I was thinking, how much deferred maintenance they had just continually put off, that they don't have a choice but build new at that point. So, of course, there's always the $100 home comparison that's done every year at budget time, so we've stuck that in here for you also. Of course, Geary County's the lowest, $454. But we're in the second lowest at just short of $516 on that home. We'll see that Dodge City, being the neighbor, just over $612 for that home. And that's actually up to a little over $2 from where they were the prior year in that cost. Whereas Garden City was only up 60 cents in that same time period. Andover, of course, was the highest, $731 per home. It's interesting though, DeSoto here, they're at $730 this past year. That's actually down $80 from the year before. So they were in first place last year, I should say. We know most of Andover's is due to its bond and interest. Most of Dodge City's increase over Garden is due to its LOB. And then Geary County, as Laura said, very little bond and interest or capital outlay for their funding. And then the taxes levied per FTE, using an unweighted FTE. Geary County, 1,221 versus Garden City, we'd be in the 5th spot here at 2,364. And like I said earlier, we kind of go back and forth with Topeka. This past year, they were at 2,255. The second lowest one is actually Hayesville, 1,439 levy per FTE. Dodge City is in at 1,793. So that's the last graph dealing with any of the numbers. Just a quick overview as far as the audit report itself. It was an unmodified auditor's report. Your financials are prepared on a regulatory basis, as is your budget, so they're easily comparable for you. The federal program audit section, compliance audit, there were no material weaknesses noted, no significant deficiencies, no question costs on your federal programs. So your staff are doing a great job. Then some of the other required communications we need to to relay to you. One of them deals with what we call the management letter. I don't know if KJ provided that electronically or, okay. It's the short 2-page letter. The cover letter itself lays out and defines for you what is the material weakness, when does it rise to the level of a significant deficiency or not, when might they be reasonably possible or probable. We're pleased to say that the district has no issues, concerns that arise to the level of a material weakness or a significant deficiency. In fact, the comments we have are insignificant, what we would call best practice things for KJ's office just to monitor and keep on top of, because at some point we don't want it to slip through the cracks and eventually become a problem for the district. So just 3 or 4 small items. Reminder for the need to review the minutes to ensure they're complete. I think this past year there was a small lease agreement that was approved, but that approval never got reflected in the minutes. Encumbrances, I'm just encouraging to be sure that appropriate documentation is attached supporting those encumbrances before those approvals occur. And then a couple items on federal funds that basically boil down to we don't need to encumber money in the federal programs. It can just cause problems, and sometimes those little things can cause the biggest problems. So maybe easiest just not to deal with them. And then the district did address some comments from the prior year, especially as far as the preparation of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. That it was much more complete this year. So. And then the larger letter that was attached is the required communication we need to make to you as the governing body. It lays out the responsibilities of ourselves as the auditors and you as management of the district. Goes into the plan, scope, and timing of the audit, some of the qualitative aspects of the district's more significant accounting processes and practices. Let you know of your significant accounting policies. You didn't have any changes in those this past year. You do have some significant accounting estimates, and under the regulatory basis of accounting that's used for the district's financials, those are typically your estimates for encumbrances and accounts payable at year end, because there's some element of judgment in those. And then as far as the financial statement disclosures, we figure usually the most sensitive disclosure from a public perspective maybe is the district's compliance with Kansas statutes, and we found no problems there. It goes on to let you know we didn't encounter any difficulties working with management during the audit process. There are what's labeled corrected and uncorrected misstatements. Those are the journal entries, and they're not unusual. Copies of those are attached to the letter for you. We didn't have any disagreements with management. Management signed the representation letter at the end of the audit, and that's attached to this letter for your review also. Not aware of any consultations that management might have had with other accounting firms for any disagreements or anything. And as we indicated, no significant findings or issues through the audit process. So in a nutshell, with, like we said, a clean audit opinion. The district's offices are very diligent and conscientious on everything they do. Worked with us great in the audit process, so we appreciate that. So. Any questions?
Board, nothing, anyone? You were on the committee, Laura.
I'd just like to thank them for making time. They actually came to my office, and I really appreciated that. I got sick, so the original scheduled meeting, we had to move, so they were gracious enough to come to my office and go over everything. I really appreciate all the work that KJ and Dr. Carlin put in as well. They've done a tremendous job for us, and it's really appreciated. So thank you for all that you do and making sure everything's looking good. Thank you.
If you have any questions at any point when you're looking at it, feel free to holler at us too. We're available anytime. KJ can probably field most of them, but feel free to holler at us. Like I said, it's your turn.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for the presentation, and for all your work. So we've got the district audit, and we're not taking any kind of action at this point, I don't believe, are we?
I think we have to just accept the audit report.
I don't think we've ever voted on it before. We just received the information.
Okay,
If you do, we'll check. If you do, we'll have it on the next time.
okay, sounds good. And that gives us some time to take a look at it too, in depth.
Okay. Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you here, and again, it's wonderful to have your firm working year by year, year after year with us, with KJ and staff, and so thank you again.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. We'll see what we can do about the music for next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along in our agenda, I think we're ready for, D, correspondence. Any correspondence? I had a couple of compliments in emails that I received, but I think we'll get to one of those in particular later. I asked Steve to address that. So nothing on agenda item D, so I think we're ready for the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda, item E1 through 4A.
Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign, motion passed. Okay, curriculum report, graduation rate, Steve Nordby, welcome.
All right, thank you. Each year, the state produces a report for us with our graduation rate on it. Target for each year for each school, each entity, and I think each district is 80% of the students that qualify for graduating, and it's produced. Graduation rate is produced using this formula, which is essentially how many students graduated. This would be for class of 2018. Summer school counts all the way through September 30th. And you take that number and divide it by how many kids started as ninth graders 4 years before. Taking into account transfers in and transfers out. But it essentially is when a student begins at the high school, the clock starts ticking. And you've got 4 years. And that's a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And as you know, our students aren't often able to be put in to those boxes. So we've got a lot of factors that really do affect our graduation rate on a yearly basis. There are a lot of factors, but these are kind of the largest, the most common that we run into that work in our favor or that kind of work against us. The first, as you know, we have a migratory population sometimes in Garden City, and that means students move in and out with and come to us with varying educational backgrounds. Recently, we've seen an influx of students into our community, some of which have very limited educational experiences before they hit our high school. We've had some come to us from foreign countries that don't have any educational records at all. They have never attended a school. And they come to Garden City High School. They've been told you need to, when you arrive in the United States, you need to go to high school, you need to go to school. Well, that 4-year formula doesn't take those kids into account. You've got 4 years to earn a diploma. Some may not have been in school since what we can figure out is 5 years, 6 years. They have very limited abilities in a lot of cases. And in other cases, we have some students whose family just moved. And we're not sure sometimes where they went. And so our population, the migratory nature of it, that's something that we work with, we work through. Also, the academic languages that our kids speak. That sometimes makes getting an education as far as the high school level difficult. We have students who speak 28 languages from 29 nations at Garden City High School. So, that can create some difficulties sometimes in trying to catch up students or trying to get them in an academic setting. Things that work in our favor, the layout of Garden City High School and the investment the community made in a freshman academy. We found out that kids are way more successful and much more likely to graduate high school if they can leave our freshman academy with the credits they need on track and get them that first good step through high school. That has really worked in our favor as far as getting kids that far into the journey and in good standing. So the 9th grade academy in that layout, and also our academies being set up into more intimate, smaller learning communities. We're able to develop deeper relationships with principal, counselor, and teachers, and it's been a good move for us with our layout of our school. The fact that we have differing routes for our students to take. There's no one-size-fits-all, cure-all in education. And so having different routes, having an alternative school, having a virtual school, that helps. That helps us get kids into the programs that work best for them. And having good partners that are able to help get them placed where they need to be. And our partnership with our truancy program, our court system, through the truancy diversion program, being able to intercede more effectively with parents and families. When kids aren't in school, they have trouble learning. And so our increase in effectiveness for our truancy program and working to do some more proactive work with our families really does help us meet our graduation requirements for students. So here we are over the last few years compared to the state of Kansas. We're in blue up at the top. The Kansas as a whole is in the red. The last couple of years we've been right at pretty much the state average. There is also a 5-year graduation rate that is calculated. It's not really used for anything other than to make us feel better about the fact that when our kids aren't necessarily graduating in 4 years, they stay and they get that diploma finished in 5. But once again, we've been well into the 90% range in the past, and we've always been really close to that. Yes.
So those are numbers statewide on
Yes.
5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Those are available. That's good to know.
yeah, the statewide graduation rate in 5 years has hovered between 85 and 88% of an average Kansas high school student graduating in at least 5 years.
What do you attribute to our larger success on a 5-year basis than the state average?
Well, our larger success historically, I think, is, like I said, when kids come to us sometimes with some gaps in their educational record, graduating in 4 years is hard for them, especially sometimes with language barriers. But when you get kids and families that are motivated and know the value of an education, they stick with it. And okay, it's going to take us 4.5. Okay, but that diploma is important. The diploma is important to the family. The diploma is important to the student. And so I think, you know, it's attributable to our stick-to-itiveness of our staff and our kids and their relationships to say, you know, we think about what's in the best interest of this kid, not an arbitrary 4-year timeline. If getting the student where they need to be takes 4.5, that's what we're going to do. If it takes 5, that's what we're going to do.
Is that extra time spent in the virtual academy or in the alternative?
It can be, but most of the time for us, it's at Garden City. This is all Garden City High School. Mr. Felvis will talk about his graduation rates and in his academy, and I believe Dr. Carlin has the district totals once you add the two buildings together. But this is just for students who stay in Garden City High School for the 5.
If they stay in Garden City High School, they're not considered a full-time equivalent, so they do place some financial burden on us that we're not compensated for.
I'm not sure how that one,
That's a good question.
how that works with the 5 year the students have stayed.
You can
I
count
have
it
a grant.
as long as they're full-time.
Well, we get to count for whatever.
Whatever part, if they're 1 credit short, we still get the funding for that one piece of a day. Yeah, they count, so.
Do we ever have a max time limit that will allow students to go through the high school experience?
In my experience, if a student hasn't finished in the 5 years, then we start to have conversation with him and his family about whether Mark's building is, with the adult alternative education system, is probably better suited for that student rather than to be 20 years old sitting in sea lunch. You know, that's socially, it's just not as good for that student.
And I wonder, have we specifically tracked the students that the migratory population that we have is pretty, obvious. Do we track students in any particular way to see, how long or which populations might take this 5-year track, or do we have any detailed data on that?
No, well, we look at each of our subgroups and particularly the ones that aren't as successful, so we do focus in on those subgroups, but I don't know that we've done any longitudinal kind of studies on.
I think that our ESL department keeps pretty specific records on what kids take, what percentage of time, because they write outcome plans for each student, which tracks how long it's projected to take. When a student comes in and they're completely a newcomer,